So I wanted to talk about the law of God today. So if I ask anyone here what the law of God means, pretty sure I'll comfortably say that most everyone here would know that the law of God means the Word of God. Okay, but I was having a discussion with someone last month, and it got me curious because this person believed that anytime the Bible makes a reference to the law, that it's always a reference to the Mosaic law. And I didn't know that before. Okay, I guess because I always, when I began understanding the scriptures by listening to Mr. Camping, I learned from the very beginning the right way to understand when the Bible refers to the law in different places, that it's always a reference to the whole Word of God. But I did research this online, and I realized that this person's view was very, very common. A lot of people hold to this view, in other words. So what I want to do is I want to go to the scriptures, take a look through the scriptures to see, and allow the scriptures to show us exactly what God means when He uses the word, the law. Okay, so let's start off by looking at Exodus chapter 12, verse 49. This is the first time we read of the Mosaic law being given to Moses, which he was charged to give to the children of Israel. There we read, "One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you." Okay, so this word translated as law here is Strong's number 8451, and it's the Hebrew word that's pronounced as Torah. Does that word sound familiar? Okay, so the word Torah, if you've ever heard it being used, it's most commonly used in Jewish circles to talk about or to speak of the first 5 books of the Bible. Okay, the 5 books that Moses wrote. But in Christian circles, the first 5 books are referred to as the Pentateuch, which is supposed to be a Greek compound word which means 5 books. But essentially, when you hear the word Torah being used, know that the proper translation is the word law. Okay, so Torah means law. Okay, and so we can see that in Exodus 12:49, God just referred to what He commanded Moses. He referred to that as law. Okay, or we could say as the Torah. So let's take a look and see what the context is of what God exactly is commanding Moses to command the children of Israel. I want to read from verses 43 to 49 of Exodus 12. There we read, "And Jehovah said unto Moses and Aaron, This is the ordinance of the Passover, that there shall no stranger eat thereof. But every man's servant that is brought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then he shall eat thereof. A foreigner and an hired servant shall not eat thereof. In one house it shall be eaten. Thou shalt not carry it forth out of the flesh abroad out of the house, neither shall you break a bone thereof. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover to Jehovah, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land. For no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you." So we can see here that the context is speaking about the keeping of the ordinance of the Passover. Well, the same ordinance that applied to the children of Israel also applied to the stranger that lived in Israel, okay, that lived among them, okay, as long as all the males in the stranger's family were circumcised. And if we look at it a little closer here, God referred to this ordinance as law, okay, or as Torah. And the word ordinance is Strong's number 2708, and it's mostly translated as statute. In other words, by God referring to the Passover as an ordinance and a law, He's linking the two words together. Okay, an ordinance or a statute is law. Okay, and this is important to know because this means that the Torah or the law didn't originate with Moses and the nation of Israel. It also goes back to the days of Abraham. And really, it actually goes all the way back to creation. Let's turn to Genesis chapter 26. I want to read verses 2 to 5. Genesis 26, verses 2 to 5. And in the context here, God is speaking to Isaac, Abraham's son. There we read, "And Jehovah appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and I will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven. And I will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because that Abraham obeyed my voice, and he kept my charge, and my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So here in verse 5, we find both words that we just went over being used in the same verse in the Old Testament together for the first time. Okay, the word law, the word Torah, or the word law, and the word statute, which is the word ordinance. Okay, and this is really a key verse in understanding and helping us to understand what God means when he uses the word law. Okay, so for those who hold to the belief that the law is always only a reference to the Mosaic law, they would read this verse and they would have to conclude that God's voice is something separate or different from his charge, which would be something separate from his commandments, which would be something separate from his statutes, and so on, separate from his law. Okay, so what we want to find out is whether or not the Bible links all of these words as the same thing or not. Okay, so what we want to take a look at is the verses that we just read. We don't really have to look very far because we already saw that there. The word statute, we understand that a statute is a law. Well, what about a charge? Or what about a commandment? Okay, or even God's voice? Well, a charge, like a commandment, is something that is to be kept. Let's turn to Joshua chapter 22. I want to read verses 1 to 3. Joshua chapter 22. Verse 1, there we read, Then Joshua called the Reubenites and the Gadites and half the tribe of Manasseh, and he said unto them, Ye have kept all that Moses, the servant of Jehovah, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice in all that I commanded you. Okay, now Joshua is going to reiterate what he just said, but he's going to do it in another way. Verse 3, Ye have not left your brethren these many days unto this day, but have kept the charge of the commandment of Jehovah your God. So this passage is teaching us that everything that Moses and Joshua commanded the people were the commandments, or we could say it was the charge of God. So here God is linking the charge with the commandment as something that is to be kept or something that's to be obeyed. Okay, and if we turn to Deuteronomy 11:1, we're going to see the same thing again. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy 11:1. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 1. There we read, Therefore thou shalt love Jehovah thy God, and keep his charge, and his statutes, and his judgments, and his commandments always. Okay, so all these words that we're reading are all pointing to the same thing. They're all pointing to God's law. Let's take a look at 1 Kings chapter 2. I want to read the first 3 verses. 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 1. There we read, Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong, therefore, and show thyself a man, and keep the charge of Jehovah thy God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, and his commandments, and his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, and whithersoever thou turnest thyself. Okay, so based on what we're seeing so far, we can conclude already that the Bible is most certainly linking all of these words together. Okay, God's charge, his commandments, his statutes, his testimonies, his judgments, these are all his laws. And where do they come from? Where do all these things come from? They come from the mouth of God. Okay, or we could say they come from the voice of God. Okay, and many times in the Bible, God likens his voice also with the law. Let's take a look at Jeremiah 32. Jeremiah 32, I want to read verse 23. Jeremiah 32, verse 23, we read, "And they came in and possessed it, but they obeyed not thy voice, neither walked in thy law. They have done nothing of all that thou commandest them to do. Therefore thou hast caused all this evil to come upon them." So to not obey God's voice and to not walk in his law are saying the same thing. Let's take a look at a few more examples. Let's take a look at Jeremiah 9:13. Jeremiah 9:13, we'll read verse 13 and 14. There we read, "And Jehovah saith, because they have forsaken my law, which I set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, neither walked therein, but have walked after the imagination of their own heart, and after Balaam, which their fathers taught them." Again, forsaking God's law and not obeying his voice are saying the same thing. Let's take a look at one more. Jeremiah 44:23. Jeremiah 44, verse 23. There we read, "Because ye have burned incense, and because ye have sinned against Jehovah, and have not obeyed the voice of Jehovah, nor walked in his law, nor his statutes, nor his testimonies. Therefore this evil is happened unto you as at this day." Okay, so again, we can keep doing this pretty much all day. No matter where you look in the scriptures, we're always going to see that God is linking his words together with what he calls his law. Okay, we're always going to see that his statutes are the same as in his judgments and his commandments, his testimony. They are all the law of God. Okay, so up to this point, we're able to confirm that the word law isn't reserved just for the Mosaic law, okay, but it can also refer to any commandment, statute, ordinance, testimony found throughout the Bible. Okay, so now let's take a look at the New Testament, because I want to see now, or I want to show you now, that the Bible does confirm that when it speaks of the law, that it isn't only referring to the Mosaic law. So the word law in the New Testament is Strong's number 3551, and it's always translated as law. Okay, and because the New Testament often refers back to the Old Testament law, it's a way for us to confirm that the Mosaic law is not the only writings that God is referring to as law. So I'm going to show you an example of that. Let's turn to John chapter 10. John 10, we're going to read verses 30 to 34. John chapter 10, verse 30. There we read, "I and my Father are one." Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, "Many good works have I showed you from my Father. For which of those works do you stone me?" The Jews answered him, saying, "For good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy, because that thou, being a man, makest thyself God." Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law, I said ye are gods?" Okay, so here Christ helps us understand what he means by the use of the phrase written in your law. Okay, so he's about to explain to us what he means, or how he identifies the law. Okay, and he doesn't quote from the Mosaic law. Okay, he's actually quoting from the book of Psalms. So let's take a look at Psalm 82. I want to read verses 5 to 8. Psalm 82, verses 5 to 8. There we read, "They know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are the children of the Most High. But ye shall die like men, and fall as one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for thou shalt inherit all nations." So the phrase we just read in John 10:34, where Christ said, is it not written in your law? And then he quotes from the book of Psalms, teaches us that the law that was given to the nation of Israel consists of more than just the Mosaic law. Okay, God is teaching us that the term the law doesn't only apply to the law of Moses, but it applies to other books of the Bible as well. Okay, let's take a look at John chapter 15. So God gives us quite a few examples in order for us to be sure of this. John chapter 15, we're going to read verses 23 to 25. John 15:23, there we read, "He that hateth me, hateth my Father also. If I had not done among them the works which none other man did, they had not sinned. But now they have both seen and hated both me and my Father. But this cometh to pass, that the words might be fulfilled, which is written in their law. They hated me without a cause." Okay, so here once again, we're learning the same principle. Since Christ is quoting here from something that he says is written in their law, then we would consider, okay, well, if he's only referring to the Mosaic law, then we would expect to find it written somewhere in the first 5 books. But we don't find it in the first 5 books. Again, here, Christ is quoting from the book of Psalms. So let's take a look one more time in the book of Psalms, chapter 35. We'll read verses 18 to 19. Psalm 35, verse 18. There we read, "I will give thee thanks in the great congregation. I will praise thee among such people. Let not them that are mine enemies wrongfully rejoice over me. Neither let them wink with the eye that hate me without a cause." Okay, let's take a look at another example. Let's go back to the book of John, John 12:32. We're going to read down to verse 34. John 12:32 to 34. There we read, "And if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. The people answered him, We have heard out of the law that Christ abideth forever. And how sayest thou the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man?" Okay, so here even the Pharisees acknowledge what they considered to be the law. Okay, and it wasn't just the Mosaic law, because they just said, "We have heard out of the law that Christ abideth forever." And then again, they didn't quote from the Mosaic law, they quoted from the book of Daniel. Okay, let's take a look at Daniel chapter 7. Daniel 7, verse 13 and 14. Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. There we read, "I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the